How did Dana White turn a struggling fight promotion into billions? What are the secrets behind his fortune? Today, we reveal it all. Dana White was born in 1969 on the hard edges of Boston, where every dollar had to be earned and every opportunity was a fight. His early years were spent in cramped apartments and local boxing gyms, learning the business of survival as much as the business of combat. By the 1990s, White was hustling on the regional fight circuit, booking venues, managing fighters, and scraping together enough cash to keep the lights on. The fighters he managed, like Ken Shamrock and Ronnie Korn, were not household names yet, but they were hungry, and so was he. White's reputation grew not just for his work ethic, but for his ability to get things done. He built a network across the East Coast and Midwest, becoming the go-to guy for up-and-coming talent and last-minute deals. Every handshake, every late-night phone call added to his arsenal of connections. But it was in LAS Vegas, the city that lives and dies by risk, where his fortunes would change forever. Through mutual friends in the casino world, White crossed paths with Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta. The Fertittas, heirs to the Station Casino's empire, saw in White something rare, a street-smart operator who understood fighters, contracts, and the pulse of the crowd. They watched him navigate the chaos of fight nights and handle egos in back rooms. Trust was built not in boardrooms, but in smoky gyms and midnight meetings. By the late 1990s, White was consulting for the UFC, a promotion teetering on bankruptcy, negotiating venue contracts, and managing fighter logistics on a shoestring budget. It was not pedigree that won the Fertittas over. It was grit. They saw a man who could bridge the gap between the raw violence of the cage and the cold logic of business. When the time came to make a move, they did not just want a figurehead. They wanted a partner who had bled for the sport. In Dana White, they found exactly that. January 2001. In a Las Vegas parking lot, the Fertitta brothers made a decision that would ripple through the world of sports. They agreed to buy the battered remains of the UFC for $2 million in cash. The deal was more than a rescue. It was a calculated gamble. That money did not buy glitz or a ready-made audience. It bought a name, a battered cage, and the rights to a sport most states wanted nothing to do with. The Fertittas did not just want to own it. They wanted someone ruthless enough to run it. Dana White was handed the presidency, not as a courtesy, but as a weapon. The legal entity was Zuffa, a plain Delaware limited liability company on paper, but a vessel for transformation. The ownership ledger told its own story. Lorenzo Fertitta, 40.5%. Frank Fertitta, 40.5%. Dana White, 9%. His share locked in with a 5-year vesting schedule, a rare cut for a promoter in a world ruled by casino bosses. White's contract spelled out his power: an annual salary of $150,000 plus performance bonuses tied to event profits. But the real leverage was in the management clause: full operational control, the right to sign or cut fighters, shape the brand, and a veto over any move that threatened his vision. The Fertittas held the purse strings, but White held the keys to the cage. Zuffa's early days were run like a startup with a ticking clock. The operating budget was set at $5 million, split between fighter pay, production, and overhead. A $2 million line of credit from Station Casinos backed the push for more events, over 40 fights a year, each one a roll of the dice. The paperwork was dry, but the stakes were anything but. In those first months, every dollar was a bet on whether Dana White and the Fertittas could turn a fringe spectacle into a legitimate empire. The next move would demand more than cash. It would demand audacity. January 2005. The UFC was still fighting for survival, but Dana White was about to change everything with a single gamble on television. The launch of The Ultimate Fighter on Spike T5 wasn't just a reality show. It was a lifeline. In homes across America, millions tuned in to watch unknown fighters chase a shot at glory. The ratings hit a 1.6 Nielsen rating, blowing past expectations and making mixed martial arts impossible to ignore. With every episode, the UFC's audience grew. By the time the season ended, pay-per-view sales did not just climb, they exploded. Events that once scraped by now pulled in numbers no one in the fight business had ever seen. In less than a year, the UFC's pay-per-view revenue surged to over $222 million, outpacing wrestling and boxing. The price of entry kept rising too, from $29.95 in the early days to $64.99 for high-definition events, and fans kept paying. For every dollar spent, Dana White and the Fertittas watched the balance sheet swell. But behind the cameras, the real show was happening in the accounting offices. The Ultimate Fighter turned television exposure into a tidal wave of new subscribers and pay-per-view buyers. Suddenly, the UFC was more than just a spectacle. It was a cash machine. Dana White had found the formula: more eyeballs, more dollars, more power. The next challenge was clear. If you could conquer pay-per-view, what else could you own? Dana White's ambition didn't stop at American pay-per-view. As the UFC's brand grew, he set his sights on the world's fastest-growing markets and negotiated deals that would turn the company into a truly global powerhouse. In 2015, White secured a partnership with Tencent, China's tech giant, opening the door to a nation of over 1 billion potential viewers. The structure was bold. UFC would take a 30% share of all Chinese-produced event revenue, while Tencent handled local distribution and promotion. Suddenly, the Octagon wasn't just an American stage, it was beamed into homes across Shanghai and Beijing, building a new generation of fans and fighters. The next breakthrough came in 2018. White struck a 10-year, $1.5 billion agreement with ESPN+, locking in a fixed annual payment that insulated the UFC from the swings of pay-per-view sales. For the first time, the company's core revenue didn't depend on a single blockbuster fight. ESPN Plus guaranteed a steady flow of cash, and every new subscriber meant more upside. The deal wasn't just about money, it was about legitimacy. UFC now sat alongside NFL and NBA, a permanent fixture in the American sports calendar. Saudi Arabia entered the picture in 2021, injecting $150 million to bring premium events to the Gulf and cementing the UFC's presence in the Middle East. These alliances diversified the company's revenue far beyond North America. By 2022, international events accounted for a quarter of total UFC revenue. Each contract, each handshake, expanded the empire and pushed the company's valuation higher. With every new market, Dana White wasn't just selling fights. He was selling the UFC as a global phenomenon and setting the stage for a payday that would stun the sports world. July 2016. The UFC's boardroom is silent, save for the shuffle of contracts and the buzz of cell phones. After years of rumors, the number lands with a thud: $4 billion. That is the price Endeavor, then WMEIMG, agrees to pay for the UFC cash, debt, and stock. It is the largest sale in sports history, and Dana White stands at the center of it. But not every dollar flows to him. The UFC's enterprise value is one thing, the personal windfall is another. White negotiates more than a simple cash out. He rolls his equity, trading his original 9% for a new 5% stake in the merged company, a move that keeps him tied to the future of the sport he built. The contract guarantees his title as president for 5 years, locks in a $1 million base salary, and grants him $50 million in restricted stock units, shares that vest only if revenue targets are hit. The Fertittas walk away with billions. White stays on, his fortune crystallized but still growing, every share and bonus a testament to the empire he helped create. In the eyes of Endeavor's new leadership, Dana White is not just a figurehead, He is the engine that keeps the money machine running. But while the ink dries and the headlines celebrate, a storm is brewing outside the boardroom. The next chapter will not come without a fight. Courtrooms replaced boardrooms as the UFC faced a wave of legal battles and public backlash. In 2024, antitrust plaintiffs forced a $335 million settlement, one of the largest in sports history. Fighters argued that contracts locked them into the promotion, suppressing pay and stifling competition. The court's decision did not just cost money, it exposed the machinery behind the empire, revealing how little of the UFC's billions trickled down to those who bled for it. Sponsorship became another fault line. The Reebok uniform deal, once pitched as a leap forward, capped individual fighter sponsorship income at just $2,500 per fight. For many, this meant losing tens of thousands in outside deals. The backlash was immediate and loud. Champions and journeymen alike lined up to denounce the contract, claiming it robbed them of their livelihoods, while the UFC's own sponsorship revenue soared. The uniform policy became a symbol of control, one that fueled lawsuits and public protests. Regulators weighed in too. The Nevada Athletic Commission fined the UFC $500,000 after a 2020 audit found lapses in fighter safety protocols. Compliance reforms followed, but the message was clear: even the most powerful empires face consequences. Through every controversy, Dana White defended the business, but the cost of dominance was now measured not just in profits, but in settlements, fines, and the voices of those left fighting for their share. In a world where the UFC now commands over $10 billion in value, power and fortune move behind closed doors. As the spotlight grows brighter, the stakes and the questions only intensify. Dana White proves that building billions requires vision, risk, and relentless ambition.